July 26, 1944. 30,000 feet above Munich. Captain Charles "Red" McRae of the 355th Fighter Group banks his P-51 Mustang hard left, sunlight flashing off the silver wings. His flight has been escorting B-17s returning from a raid on the ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt. The radio crackles with chatter, the usual nervous humor. Then, a shriek cuts through the air. It's not gunfire, not a piston engine, not anything they've ever heard before. A silver blur rips past their formation, leaving no contrail, only a faint shimmer in the sun. McRae's head jerks around. "What the hell was that?" he yells into his mic. No one answers. The thing is already gone, a ghost. Seconds later, two of the B-17s behind him erupt in flame. On the ground below, Luftwaffe pilot Lieutenant Hans Fay grins inside his tight leather helmet. His aircraft, the Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, howls like thunder as it screams through the bomber stream at 540 miles per hour. The twin Jumo 004 turbojets surge behind him, shaking the fuselage. Fay squeezes the trigger. His four 30 Malawian Quachas 108 cannons hammer the sky, each shell capable of tearing a bomber apart with a single hit. In the gunner's turret of one stricken B-17, Sergeant Jimmy Daniels sees a streak slice through the clouds. No propeller, he shouts in disbelief. Then darkness. The war in the air has just changed. But almost no one, Allied or Axis, understands what they've just witnessed. In the control bunkers near Augsburg, Luftwaffe ground crews cheer as Fay touches down. The jet's landing gear wobbles under strain, engines coughing as they spool down. His crew chief, Oberfeldwebel-Becker, rushes forward shouting over the noise. "Mein Gott, Hans. It works, it really works." Fay pulls off his goggles, sweat cutting streaks through the soot on his face. "It flies like a devil," he says quietly. "But God help us if it breaks." Because deep inside that sleek, revolutionary machine hides a secret weakness. The engines are fragile, prone to flame out if throttled too quickly. And Germany, bleeding from every front, barely has enough fuel to keep them flying. Still, for that single day, the Me-262 rules the sky. The idea had begun long before that deadly summer. Back in 1939, deep inside the Messerschmitt works at Augsburg, engineer Willy Messerschmitt and designer Dr. Hans von Ohain had dreamed of a new kind of aircraft, one freed from propellers entirely. Von Ohain's prototype turbojet had already flown on the tiny Heinkel He-178, but Messerschmitt wanted something combat-ready, a sleek, swept-wing fighter that could outclimb, outdive, and outrun anything in the sky. In 1941, test pilot Fritz Wendel took the first prototype, the Me-262 V1, into the air, barely. The engines failed minutes after takeoff. For months, they exploded, melted, or refused to start. Nickel alloys for turbine blades were scarce. Germany's industry was already strained. But the engineers persisted. By mid-1942, the first true jet-powered flight succeeded. Wendel landed shaking, laughing, shouting to the team. "It's like being pushed by angels." Yet when Messerschmitt presented the aircraft to Hitler later that year, the Führer frowned. "A bomber," he declared. "I want this machine to carry bombs." The engineers protested. It was meant to be an interceptor. Fast, agile, and unstoppable. But Hitler's obsession with Vergeltungswaffe, revenge weapons, twisted its purpose. The Me-262 would be delayed again, re-engineered to carry bombs under its sleek wings, destroying its aerodynamic advantage. By the time the air war turned against Germany, months had been lost. Allied bombers ravaged the Ruhr, the oil fields, the railways. Every day that passed, fewer pilots returned. Still, whispers spread through the Luftwaffe. "The jet is coming. The jet will save us." In early 1944, the first operational commando Nowotny, named for ace pilot Walter Nowotny, was formed. Their mission: test the new jet in combat. Nowotny himself took off from Akmer Airfield in November. Over Osnabrück, he engaged Allied fighters, downing AP-51 before being overwhelmed by numbers. His Me-262 vanished in smoke. When they found the wreckage, his parachute was unopened. The miracle machine had claimed one of Germany's best. Autumn 1944. Over Western Germany, Allied pilots start reporting silver arrows slashing through formations. Debriefing rooms fill with sketches, sleek twin-engine shapes, no propellers, leaving faint trails. Many commanders dismiss the reports as nerves. No aircraft flies that fast, one intelligence officer mutters. But then gun camera footage confirms it. Grainy black and white film shows a shape darting past the lens in a fraction of a second. The 8th Air Force knows it now. Germany has jets. On November 26th, near Leipzig, Lieutenant Joseph Peterbers of the 55th Fighter Group spots one. He was climbing like a rocket. Peterbers recalls later. I had my throttle firewalled, and still, he left me standing still. He watches the Me-262 close in on AB-17, guns flashing. Moments later, the bomber disintegrates mid-air. Back in London, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder studies the reports grimly. If they can build these in numbers, he warns, our daylight bombing campaign is finished. But that was the thing, they couldn't. Allied bombers pound the Messerschmitt factories relentlessly. Fuel refineries vanish under 1,000 bomber raids. By December, the Luftwaffe barely has enough aviation fuel to keep training aircraft airborne, let alone power-hungry jets. Inside a bunker near Augsburg, engineers stare at empty fuel tanks and order sheets stamped "Nicht verfügbar." Not available. The Jumo 004 engines, once promising, now fail after just 25 hours of flight. Ground crews cannibalize wrecked aircraft to keep a handful flying. Yet when one of those jets roars into the sky, Allied pilots feel it instantly. You could hear it before you saw it, one P-47 Thunderbolt pilot said, like a scream from another world. Every Me-262 launch was a gamble. The engines took nearly a minute to spool up, throttle too fast, and they'd catch fire. Pilots had to taxi with nervous precision, then coax the jets into the air before Allied fighters swooped in. The airfields at Lechfeld, Akmer, and Neuburg became deadly traps. American P-51s patrolled them daily, waiting to pounce as the jets landed or took off. More than half of the Me-262s lost in combat never even made it to altitude. Major Adolf Galland, one of the Luftwaffe's top aces, finally got permission to form Jagdverband 44, an elite squadron of veteran pilots flying the jet purely as a fighter. Galland himself took one up in March 1945, dueling Allied fighters over Bavaria. He shot down two before anti-aircraft fire tore through his wing. Limping home, he landed with fuel nearly gone. He would later say, "It was the greatest airplane I ever flew, and the most tragic." Meanwhile, Allied intelligence began capturing intact jets. Engineers at Farnborough and Wright Field examined them in awe. The Americans assigned their own test pilot, Jimmy Doolittle, to review the data. "This," he said, tapping the fuselage, "is what the future looks like." But for Germany, that future had arrived too late. April 1945. The Reich is collapsing. Soviet tanks are at the Oder. Allied columns push from the Rhine. The runways are craters. Pilots scavenge for fuel in abandoned depots, draining truck tanks to fill a single jet. At Lechfeld, a young pilot named Kurt Welter takes off for one last mission in his Me-262 night fighter. The engines whine as they claw for altitude. Below him, flames rise from what was once Augsburg. He spots the glow of British bombers far ahead and pushes the throttles forward. The jet surges, 540 miles per hour through darkness, but there are too many. Tracers streak past his canopy. He vanishes into the night. When dawn breaks, the airfields are silent. Scattered wrecks of Me-262s lie twisted across the tarmac, engines scorched, their sleek forms coated in dust and defeat. On May 8th, Germany surrenders. Allied teams swarm over captured airbases, photographing the strange aircraft that had terrified their pilots. The era of jet warfare has begun. Within months, Britain will test the Gloucester Meteor, America the P-80 Shooting Star. In Korea, just 5 years later, jets will dual jet for the first time. But it all began here, with the shriek of the Me-262 over a broken continent. And for those who saw it streak across the sky in 1944, that sound, the scream of the future, was one they would never forget.